Good morning. We are going to continue to read through the book Kennedy and Trump by Greg Fernandez Jr. It just happens to be me. We are now on part one. So let me cut to that right here. Part one. Hitting. All right. So let me just make sure everything is working correctly. There we are. Part one, getting to know you. This is how the book starts here. We read through the introduction last time, and we're going to continue on. We'll see how far we can get today. All right, skip down. Here we go. I've known Donald Trump for 35 years or 45 years, Robert F. Kennedy Jr. said during a Twitter Spaces interview in July 2023. I've sued him a couple times. I sued him twice to stop him from building golf courses in the New York City reservoir system. He was a big environmentalist with the Hudson River, President Trump said about Kennedy. He actually came against me in one or two deals that I was doing, big projects. He was from the environmental standpoint, but he was more reasonable than some. Trump didn't take the litigations against him personally. During one of these lawsuits, Kennedy's wife wanted to go to Palm Beach, Florida to visit Kennedy's mom for Easter. Kennedy was hesitant as he didn't want to buy airline tickets to fly all of his kids from New York to Florida. What if I find a free ride? Kennedy's wife asked. Kennedy agreed, and it didn't take long for his wife to find a free ride to Florida. Kennedy agreed, and it didn't take long for his wife to find a free ride to Florida. Who? Kennedy asked. Donald Trump. I'm suing him, responded Kennedy. He told me he knows you're suing him, said Kennedy's wife, but it's okay anyway. Even during that time when I was litigating against him, Kennedy later recalled, Trump ended up giving me a ride to Florida on his plane, and we were friendly, and we had a great time and a lot of laughs. He's a very congenial, amiable, interesting guy, and very warm. I knew Trump was no friend of the environment, Kennedy told author Dick Russell, but neither did he appear to be ideologically hidebound to a pro-pollution worldview. Indeed, he seemed less shackled to dogma or obligated by encumbrances than any other Republican presidential candidate. There were rumors that Trump's 10-year-old son Barron might have symptoms of autism spectrum, and perhaps this was something closer to the man's heart than his pocketbook. That's from Dick Russell. Early in the month of January 2017, President-elect Trump called Kennedy asking him to chair a Vaccine Safety and Science Integrity Commission. On January 10, 2017, Kennedy flew to New York and spent an hour discussing vaccine safety with Trump and two of his advisors, Kellyanne Conway and Steve Bannon. Vice President-elect Mike Pence was present for the last 15 minutes. Kennedy described Trump as thoughtful on the vaccine safety issue. Interviewed outside of Trump Tower after the meeting, Kennedy said Trump had some doubts about the current vaccine policies. He says his opinion doesn't matter, but the science does matter, and we ought to be reading, debating the science. Everybody ought to be assured that the vaccines that we have are as safe as they can possibly be. An hour after the meeting, Kennedy was interviewed by Science.org staff writer Meredith Wadman. Kennedy provided more details about the hour-long meeting with Trump. Kennedy told Wadman that Trump wants to make sure that we have the best vaccine science and safest vaccine supply that we can have. During their meeting, Trump told Kennedy about 5 friends who have the same story of a child, a perfectly healthy child who went into a wellness visit around age 2, got a battery of vaccines, spiked a fever, and then developed a suit of deficits in the 3 months following the vaccine. We talked a lot about CDC, said Kennedy, and ways to increase the independence from financial conflicts at CDC in the vaccine division. Details about when the commission's start date were not discussed at the first meeting, but it would be a 1-year commitment with experts in the field of toxicology, epidemiology, and public health. It would be an unpaid panel, according to Kennedy. I am for vaccines, Kennedy said during the interview. I have been tracking mercury in fish for 30 years, and nobody has called me anti-fish. I am pro-vaccine. I had all my kids vaccinated. I think vaccines save lives. But we are also seeing an explosion in neurodevelopmental disorders, and we ought to be able to do a cost benefit analysis and see what's causing them. We ought to have robust, transparent science and an independent regulatory agency. Nobody is trying to get rid of vaccines here. I just want safe vaccines. Soon after Kennedy spoke to the media at Trump Tower, Trump spokesperson Hope Hicks downplayed the historic meeting. The president elect enjoyed his discussion with Robert Kennedy Jr. on a range of issues and appreciates his thoughts and ideas. The president elect is exploring the possibility of forming a commission on autism, which affects so many families. However, no decisions have been made at this time. The president elect looks forward to continuing the discussion about all aspects of autism with many groups and individuals. After agreeing to work in the Trump administration, many in the environmental community, after agreeing to work in the Trump administration, many in the environmental community, including the Hudson River Keepers and the Natural Resources Defense Council, turned their back on Kennedy. By working with Trump, Kennedy was able to see who his real friends were. Those same environmentalists didn't complain when Kennedy met with George Bush Jr. With the president you don't like, said Kennedy, I always thought it was much better to meet with them than not. It didn't take long for Kennedy to realize his time in the Trump administration would be short-lived. In early 2017, President Trump ordered Anthony Fauci, NIH Director Francis Collins, and others to meet with Kennedy. So I had a meeting with all these guys, Kennedy said during an interview with Joe Rogan. I actually went into that meeting with Fauci with 3 people. One was Del Bigtree. Another one was Aaron Searing, the attorney, and another one was Lynn Redwood, who's a very, very famous nurse practitioner, public health official in Georgia. During that meeting, there was a referee there from the White House West Wing. I gave kind of a lecture showing what we knew, and I said to him in the middle of it, Tony, you've been telling people I'm a liar. When I say no vaccine, none of them have ever been tested in a placebo-controlled trial. I said, can you show me one vaccine that has been subject to a safety test? Show me one study that shows that. He couldn't find whatever he was looking for. So then he said, it's back at the NIH in Bethesda, and I'll send it to you. Well, he never did. So Aaron and I sued HHS, and said, show us one study that's ever been done on pre-licensing safety testing for vaccines. And after a year of stonewalling, they finally gave us a letter and said, we don't have any. They literally don't have any. So nobody knows what the risk profile for these products are. In a recent interview, Anthony Fauci tells the story a little differently. As soon as Trump got elected, Bobby Kennedy Jr. made a statement that was unsubstantiated by Trump people that he was going to be the head of a commission on vaccines. And I think that was the first that the Trump people heard about it. So they wanted to figure out what to do. So Jared Kushner asked me and Francis Collins, who was the director of the NIH, to sit down and listen to what Bobby Kennedy Jr. has to say. So we brought him and a team of people with him to the White House, and he came into the room and he had been saying things that we were all disagreeing with. I mean, they just had no basis on facts or reality, totally unproven. According to Fauci, Kennedy said the following, I never get a chance to fully explain what it is that I'm trying to say. So I'm going to make a presentation, so I don't want to be interrupted until the end, and then we'll talk about questions. Fauci continued telling his version of the story. So I said, well, that's not the rules that we do here, but okay, we'll cut you some slack. So we got open. The first slide I remember he showed is that it has been shown that vaccinations are responsible for the following diseases. And he gave every disease in the world. Autism was right on the top of his list. So I raise my hand and I say, Bobby, excuse me, Bobby. I don't really mean to interrupt you, but there isn't a bit of evidence at all to anything that's on this slide. And he looked at me and he says, there you go again, not allowing me to give my pitch. There you go again, not allowing me to give my pitch. So for the next 40 minutes or so, he showed slide after slide after slide that made no sense at all and was not founded. Not only was it not founded in data, it was definitely disproven as per the autism situation. So at the end of it, all we could say was, Bobby, I'm sorry, but we don't really agree with you. After the meeting, Kennedy and Fauci had a brief exchange. Not surprisingly, their versions of what happened are different. According to Fauci, as we were walking out of the room at the NIH, I went over to him and I said, Bobby, I believe you care about children and you care and you don't. Bobby, I believe you care about children and you care that you don't want to hurt them. But you got to realize that from a scientific standpoint, what you're saying does not make sense. And this issue about autism with Whitfield in England was completely disproven as being fabricated data that led to the loss of the guy's medical license. Fast forward, he writes a book, The Real Anthony Fauci, and talks about how I was responsible for killing so many people with vaccines. So I don't know what's going on in his head, but it's not good. At the end of that meeting, said Kennedy, I was in the hallway and Tony Fauci came up to me and took me aside and had a quiet conversation with me out of earshot of everyone else. And he said, I want to commend you for what you're doing. It's important work and you keep us all on our toes. So thank you. And that was his message to me. You can be the judge of how earnest he was. The idea of a Kennedy-run vaccine safety commission in the Trump administration was pushed aside quickly after the meeting with Fauci. According to Kennedy, there were no discussions specifically about the Vaccine Safety Commission, probably since February of 2017. I've spoken to the White House about other issues on vaccine safety and had a number of follow-up meetings. In the 2-month period of the short-lived Vaccine Safety Committee, Kennedy said he met with high-level officials in the White House. They've arranged meetings for me with HHS and White House officials and agency officials. Various agency officials, including NIH Director Francis Collins and his deputy Lawrence Tabak, I think. And I met with Tony Fauci, who's at the National Institute of Allergy and Infectious Diseases, Linda Birnbaum, who's at the National Institute of Environmental Health Sciences, Diana Bianchi at the Eunice Kennedy Shriver National Institute of Child Health and Human Development at NIH. And over at FDA, I've met with Peter Marks, the director of the Center for Biologics Evaluation and Research, and some other officials there. I can't remember everybody at this point, all of the people that we've met with. According to what Kennedy told Dick Russell, Trump's advisors turned their attention to dismantling the science safety net and commoditizing and monetizing every aspect of human discourse, adopting policies that will amplify the wealth of billionaires even as they sicken our citizens and destroy our planet. The story of the Kennedy and Trump Vaccine Safety Commission should have ended there, but it didn't. In July of 2024, Kennedy was asked an important question by interviewer Eric Metaxas. On the off chance that you're not elected in November and that Donald Trump is elected, would you be willing to work for him in some capacity? Kennedy quickly said, I don't think so. I would listen to a proposal, but I don't think so. Kennedy then proceeded to explain why, but before he could do so, Metaxas followed up with the question, you wouldn't serve your country? Kennedy was uncertain if he could serve effectively under President Trump. I'm not confident that I could do that, Kennedy responded. If I had that confidence, I would. Then Kennedy shared more details about what happened when he went to work for President Trump during the early days of Trump's first term in office. One of the reasons that I don't think I'd go to work for Trump is because he offered me a job in the last administration, and then he took $1 million from Pfizer. When somebody looks you in the eye and tells you, I want you to do this, And then, it was a big cost for me to go announce that I'm joining the Trump administration, an enormous cost. And then nothing is there. It makes you less willing to trust that person again. Even so, Kennedy left the door open for future collaborations with Trump in the future. Like I said, Kennedy concluded, I would listen to a proposal. My objective is to help my country. Then we have the leaked video where Kennedy and Trump discuss vaccine. Then we have the leaked video where Kennedy and Trump discuss vaccinating children shortly after Trump was shot in the ear by Matthew Crooks in Pennsylvania. I agree with you, man. Something's wrong with that whole system, Trump told Kennedy the day after being shot in the ear at a Pennsylvania rally. Yep, said Kennedy. And it's the doctors, Trump continued. You remember I said I want to do small doses. Small doses. When you feed a baby, Bobby, a vaccination that has like 38 different vaccines, and it looks like it's meant for a horse, not a 10-pound or 20-pound baby. It looks like you should be giving a horse this. And did you ever see the size of it, right? It's this massive. And then you see the baby all of a sudden starting to change radically. I've seen it too many times. And then you hear that it doesn't have an impact, right? But you and I talked about that a long time ago. President Trump easily triggers liberals. Their hatred towards President Trump changed their views on many things they once stood for. Liberals turned against the heroic whistleblower Julian Assange when Trump expressed his sympathy for the jailed journalist and free speech and civil rights advocate, wrote Kennedy. Democrats abandoned their sturdy opposition to the Trans-Pacific Partnership when Trump criticized the TPP. Trump's occasional and minor disdain for Dr. Anthony Fauci blinded Democrats to Fauci's 5-decade role as the architect of industry capture in the public health agencies. Trump's endorsement of hydroxychloroquine prompted liberals to toss the remedy into the same dumpster with Trump's global warming denials, despite overwhelming scientific support for the remedy. Donald Trump and the Kennedy family. The day before JFK Jr. died, he wrote a nice letter to Donald Trump about the passing of Trump's father. Trump received a letter on the day of JFK Jr.'s death, July 16, 1999. Dear Donald, wrote JFK Jr., I read over the weekend of your father's passing, and I just wanted to drop you a note. No matter where you are in life, losing a parent changes you. I know you had a close relationship, and I hope you'll get ample time to reflect. He sounds like a fascinating man from what I read in the Times. I like that he would go over his various work sites and pick up stray nails and return them to the carpenters. Clearly, he never lost his perspective. My condolences to you and your family. Sincerely, John Kennedy. I've taken John Kennedy's advice, Trump wrote in his book, The America We Deserve. I have reflected on my father, and I realized, as many of you have, that when a father dies, you begin to see yourself differently. It's up to you now to carry on the family business, the family tradition. You're the grown-up, one of the authorities in your family. You gain a new sense of responsibility. Those of us with experience, those of us with influence, have an obligation to rebuild the world and make it a better place. Let's stop right there just for a couple minutes because I have noticed a few typo, or at least one typo here, and I want to note that so I can go back and fix it later. I may have to just find it later, but there was something that said if when it should have said it. Let's see here. It doesn't have but about that. Yeah, I'll have to find it. But I did read it, and I was like, yeah, here it is. If the public health agencies, this should say it. And then a few other things. Sometimes the Trump administration, sometimes I capitalize the administration, and then sometimes I don't. And there are a few times whenever I mention a book, those are supposed to be italics. So I need to go back and fix that. It's a good thing I have not made this into, I have not did the worldwide distribution to that. So I'm going to go mark those notes down And then as I do, I'm just going to play a little bit of this here video. If I can get it up. That's what she said. All right.
How do you feel about potentially running alongside Donald Trump?
I want to run against Trump, and I can run against Trump better than anybody else can.
Do you think you could win?
I know I can win because I can hold. Because I get, I get many of the same supporters. I will take support from President Trump. No other Democrat can do that. My supporters are probably equally Republican and Democrat at this point, and I get more independent voters than anybody. And I can confront President Trump with the lockdowns, which no Democrat can. Lockdowns, he closed 3.3 million businesses. He closed 41% of the black-owned businesses in our country would never reopen again. It was a war on the poor. It was a war on minorities. It was the destruction of the middle class.
Bobby Kennedy, he's a Democrat from the first family, they used to call it, and he's taking almost as much heat as you are from fake news. What would you tell Bobby Kennedy?
Just hang in. I mean, they go after. He's been very nice to me. I've actually had a very nice relationship with him over the years. He's a very smart guy and a good guy. He said Trump's the greatest debater, and you can't just not debating going against Trump. I was very honored by the fact that he said that. I'm glad he feels that. But he's a very good man, and his heart is in the right place, and he's doing really well. I suppose he's at 22. That's pretty good. That's pretty good. Doing very well.
So have you talked to him lately?
No, I haven't. I would, but I haven't. There's a lot of things. He's a common sense guy, and so am I. So whether you're conservative or liberal, common sense is common sense. And a lot of what I run on is common sense. We need a wall, and we built most of it, but they didn't want to finish up the extra area. I wanted to do more. After we got it built, I wanted to do more. But without that, we had the best numbers in the border, as you know, because you've said it many times. We had the best numbers in history.
Yeah.
And now we have the worst numbers, I think, of any country ever in the world. Okay.
Well,
no country would allow this.
Mr. President, I know you got to run, so we welcome you back to New Hampshire and New England tomorrow, and look forward to seeing you again. And and you're welcome on the show anytime you want.
And people have said to me, "Why don't you run as an independent?" And I say, because I'm a Democrat. This is who I am. This is my identity. But I want my party back. I want my party to be the party that I grew up in, the party of John Kennedy, the party of Robert Kennedy, the party of FDR, and Harry Truman.
You say that you're a Democrat, but you're getting a lot of support from a lot of leading voices on the right, like Steve Bannon, Tucker Carlson, Alex Jones, former President Donald Trump. Many Democrats fear that you're a spoiler in the race, that you will damage President Biden in the primary and grease the skids for former President Trump to return to the Oval Office. This week, former President Trump said about you, Kennedy is smart and he's a common sense guy. What kind of man do you think Donald Trump is?
Well, here's what I'm not going to do in this race. I'm not going to attack other people personally. I don't think it's good for our country. And I think, what I'm trying to do in this race is bring people together, is to try to bridge the divide between Americans. My father was able to harness these populist energies. In the last day of his life, he won the most rural state in this country, South Dakota, and the most urban. He was able to bridge the divide among people who would otherwise be Republican, but wanted somebody who was common sense, who was able to appeal to their idealism, who was able to find the hero in each of them, who was able to get them to transcend narrow self-interest and see themselves as part of a community and part of this, incredible American adventure in modeling self-governance for the rest of the world. And so I'm proud that President Trump likes me, even though I don't agree with him on most of his issues, because I don't want to alienate people. I want to bring people together. I'm proud that all these people like me and that I have independent supporters and Democratic supporters, and that I'm able to bring a lot of people. Every Democrat says, I want to end the polarization. But how do you do that without talking to people who don't agree with you? How do you do that without appealing to people, without My purpose is to find the issues, the values that we have in common, rather than, focus on the issues and the personalities
But
that keep us all apart.
As a lifelong Democrat, as you just said very passionately, will you pledge to support whoever the Democratic nominee is, whoever it is, whether it's you, whether it's President Biden?
Oh, of course I'm
Do a
not
little
going
more
to do that.
for this.
I'm not
not
going
gonna do that.
No, of course I'm not. I'm not.
If
Listen,
you don't get the nomination, you won't support President Biden?
I don't know what I'll do. Let's see let's see what happens in this campaign. Let's see, if people are living up to democratic values and having debates and having discussions and, talking to each other. But I'm not
And
going
if
to
you feel
buy.
that's not happening, would you then support a Republican or run as an independent?
You know what? My plan is to win this election, and I don't have a plan B.
I love it.
Okay.
I don't know why the crowd laughs right there at that point. But he's absolutely right. And that was that was a big thing. They kept asking him, well, what if you don't get it? What if you don't get it? Because they all knew that the system was rigged against RFK Jr. It was already done. It was in the books and they were going to rig it. I think everybody except for me probably knew that. I still had hope that he would get there. And we got there. Like I said, sometimes we have plans and we think, man, wouldn't this be awesome? God's plan is always better, and it turned out great. So I have just started to make some notes here. I got a little notebook here. Started to make some notes. This is cool. Now I can actually go back and do one more finalized edit before I do the worldwide distribution for this book. So this is going to work out very well as far as editing the book kind of in live time. I'm going to read a little bit more. My voice is not giving out yet, so I'm going to read a little bit more because I do like hearing RFK Jr. and hearing President Trump both talk about John F. Kennedy Jr. It's fascinating stuff to me. So let's read a little bit more here. Both Kennedy and Trump believed JFK Jr. would have run for president one day. I think he wanted to run, Kennedy said during an interview with Georgia Magazine. I think we're supposed to highlight Georgia Magazine too. Let me just make a note of that. Page 16. Okay, I'm just going to write that down. George. I believe I'm supposed to do that. Not on the Kennedy legacy, but he wanted to run because he was capable and he had great ideas. And he was interesting and he was charismatic. So I think there was part of him that said, I don't want to do this just because everybody in my family has been doing it and then run on the Kennedy name. I thought that was admirable of him. And I think RFK Jr. is kind of the same way. I don't think he probably felt the same thing. I don't want to run just because everyone in my family is running or because it's the cool thing to do, because I could actually win. You got to be very serious. So when RFK Jr. said he was all in to run, it was a big moment and a big shift in the political spectrum of this great country. It changed everything, I believe, for the better. Sometimes even when you lose, you win. And I think that's exactly what happened with RFK Jr. I got to know John Kennedy very well, John, said Trump. I think he would have been president. His mother wanted him to go into politics really strongly. He wanted to be an actor, and he loved the concept of being an actor. He was a handsome guy, very handsome guy, and I think he probably would have been good at whatever he wanted to do. Trump said JFK Jr. would have run for Senate in New York with his mother's blessing, and then would have become president of the United States. President Trump also had a good relationship with RFK Jr.'s uncle, Senator Ted Kennedy. Ted Kennedy, believe it or not, was a friend of mine, said Trump. I met him through Palm Beach. They had a big house, a compound. They call it the Kennedy compound. And I had a very nice house also, but I got to know him very well, and he liked me. We were friends. I like how Trump always. They had a Kennedy compound. I had a compound too. He's just got to throw that in there. Trump once asked Ted Kennedy who was the dumbest person in the Senate. Probably Joe, Ted Kennedy answered. I said, "Who's Joe?" Trump asked. He said, "Joe Biden." Can you believe it? This is 25 years ago. I think it was one of the early times I've ever heard the name. Trump called Ted Kennedy a smart guy and a great politician. Without going into specifics, Trump said he did a big, big favor for Ted. Really big. It wasn't hard for me to do, but it was very big and important for him. He liked me, and I liked him. I'm just going to make a note of page 16 to ask Catherine about whether I put the period before or after great politician. Politician. All right. I know it's slowing things down a little bit, but this is really going to help me in the final editing process of this book. I thought I was done with it, but just when you think you're done, they pull you back in, which is fine. It's great. 2024 presidential election. Democrats like Kennedy. Republicans like Kennedy. Libertarians and independents like Kennedy. Even Trump likes Kennedy. How could anyone not like some of his views? Kennedy's critics are usually the same ones spreading misinformation and disinformation about President Trump. Trump has called Kennedy a far left and an ultra liberal. I guess that's okay to check on that. But in the same interview, Trump also said he liked his presidential opponent. Compare that to what he had said about Joe Biden, Nikki Haley, and the other GOP presidential candidates, and you will see a big difference. What makes Kennedy so special? And I think we'll stop it right there for today. All right, so found some edits, found some things that need to be worked on, that need to be updated. And God bless you all. Until next time, may Jesus Christ be with you. Remember, Jesus loves you, and so do I. Thank you for watching, for listening. The second episode of the book reading of Kennedy and Trump by Greg Fernandez Jr. God bless.